Learning jazz standards and being confident at improvising, comping and playing the heads to them is one of the key ways to feel like you're progressing as a musician. However, one problem that I found quite often in students is the retention of jazz standards, being able to recall them months or maybe even years into your journey as an aspiring jazz musician. When you hang out or go watch or talk to professional jazz musicians, then you'll find that they often know lots of different tunes in all 12 keys and they're ready to go at a moment's notice, right there, right then. So how do you get to that level? What are the steps that you want to do, and what should you do now to ensure that you're actually progressing as a musician? I'm going to help you out with these in this video and share with you some tips that have been useful for me personally and with all the students that I've been privileged to work with. Just before we begin the video, I'd like to tell you about a free beginner jazz guitar course which I have available for anyone that is new to learning jazz guitar. I've put this jazz guitar course together to break down jazz guitar in a coherent and structured way. There are over 25 4K video lessons and a 40-page downloadable PDF to help you get started. Each module comes with downloadable PDFs, chord diagrams, etudes and studies to help you get started learning the wonderful art of jazz. I'd like to break this video up into 3 different points to help you understand what I'm talking about. The first point is more of a disclaimer than a point, but I think it's really worth mentioning, and that is that you shouldn't necessarily feel like you have to be able to recite every single jazz standard that you've ever attempted to play. And that's kind of 2 reasons behind that. The first is that, sometimes you may learn or play a tune that's not very commonly called or talked about, which is not a bad thing, but it could be for a one-off kind of gig or something like that. So if you forget something that's just been a one-off kind of thing, then that's never even played, then it's not the end of the world unless you really like the song. And the second is that there are just simply going to be some tunes which you do not like and they do not bring you joy and happiness to play. So I couldn't think of anything that would want to make anybody give up an instrument quicker than to say practice a song that you don't like just because you have to know it. That's counterintuitive, really. So I hope that in choosing to play jazz then you like the majority of the standards, but truth be told, there's kind of a few jazz standards which I'm not massively crazy about, some which I learn just because you need to know them, but others which I just may not enjoy playing a whole lot. So they're ones that I might have let go, really. So and that's what happens. Obviously you're talking about a very, very small majority of songs in the overall bank of songs that you will know, but I think it has to be said that you shouldn't pressure yourself to learn, practice, play something that you're not particularly interested in unless you may really need to know it. The first thing I'd like to talk about is something called retrieval memory. Retrieval memory. When we learn to play anything, then there's usually 3 stages, which are learn, practice, play. Learn, practice, play. And when you learn a song like Autumn Leaves, for example, a jazz standard, you'll learn the melody by itself. You'll learn the chords. And you'll probably learn to solo as well. Or you'll learn lines, 2-5-1 lines. Minor 2-5. And you'll practice those things when you're learning it for a couple of weeks, a month, maybe 2 months. Now the problem kind of starts there. You'll do all that, learn all that, you might even be able to get a nice video, you might even be able to perform it at a jam and you'll feel good. Then you move on to the next song, maybe it's Blue Bossa. Do the same thing with that melody, chords. Soloing as well. And the same thing will happen. But then when it comes to playing Autumn Leaves, you won't be able to remember the melody, you won't be able to remember the chords. So why does that happen? And what's the problem with that? Well, that's where retrieval memory kicks in. When you start working on something else, you need to keep on playing what you've already played. You need to be able to retrieve that information and play it. And retrieval memory is all about being able to kind of play something if you haven't played it in a while, because you know it so well and you practiced it so much. So the way in which you can do this today to actually have an improvement on your playing is to first start by, obviously when you learn the next song, keep on playing the first song. At first you might feel like you have to play the first song every day, then you might go to 2 days, then 3 days, then you might only have to play Autumn Leaves once a week, once a month. And the true test of the memory comes from when you haven't played it in perhaps a couple of weeks or a couple of months or maybe 6 months, and you can still remember it. Because if you think about it, if a good jazz musician knows hundreds of songs, then even if they're practicing several hours a day, they simply can't play through all of the songs. It's very, very hard to keep that as regular rotation. If you know 1,000 songs, geez, that would be like impossible to do. But what they have is good retrieval memory, because they've probably done this or something similar, where they played them at gigs, or if you've got enough gigs, the songs will crop up at gigs, and that will have the similar effect. But if you don't have that many gigs or performance opportunities, or even if you've got so many you want to balance out the two, then this is a good way to do it. So write a list of the songs that you know, and then try to kind of pick out ones that you haven't played and see how well you can kind of connect to them. And some people find that kind of a little bit disconcerting sometimes, or they get a little bit put off if they can't remember it straight away. You might hopelessly give up, but look, it does happen. It happens to me, happens to everyone. You might just forget a bridge of a song or the chords or a bit of the melody. It will often, because you've already done all the legwork and you've hopefully learnt this properly at some point in the past, it never takes that long to get it back together again. So it's a very kind of positive thing, I think, to think about. It would probably take you nowhere near as long, often only 5 or 10 minutes, to kind of get together if you've learnt it already. So you've got to do that. And like I said, if you don't do that, it can become such kind of a problem at jam sessions where, you think, oh yeah, I've learnt Autumn Leaves, but I'm not confident of doing it. You need to be able to recite all of these songs, especially kind of the rudimentary jazz standards like Autumn Leaves, Blue Bossa, Girl from Ipanema, So What, etc. You need them all ready to go. And I think it's a very kind of important thing that helps beginner jazz guitar players get to an intermediate stage. This brings us to the last point, and this is a very, very important point to consider as well. So when you learn a song, I think the reason why most people kind of forget them is that they never really learnt them well enough to begin with. And it's interesting really, because I think, especially when it comes to jazz, I almost feel like the term learning songs is almost incorrect, because if you think about, most guitar songs that you may have learned, you kind of just play them as a wrote by numbers kind of thing. If you're playing all the classic kind of guitar repertoire that people learn to play when they're learning, like Sweet Child of Mine or Sweet Home Alabama or whatever it might be, Smoke on the Water, most people never set kind of, when they're learning that, they don't think I'm playing the intro, the bridge, we're not concerned with all this. We just learn to play it, and it's kind of like, more of just monkey see, monkey do type of learning, which is okay. Obviously to get started, that's not a problem. But as you mature more into a musician, you want to kind of, really try to get away from that and see what's happening. So I think that jazz musicians, tend to, like I said, I don't really like the term memorizing songs. What we're really just doing is kind of memorizing blocks, really, blocks of how things work, and seeing, oh, that's just the, 2-5-1 going down a tone, or that's kind of the rhythm changes bridging that song, but each chord's 2 bars, and you're really kind of memorizing things by, obviously, how they sound, obviously, but also what they are in terms of musical blocks. It's not just kind of memorizing a song where everything is just one chord preceded by another, or one line preceded by another. So for example, Autumn Leaves, straight away if I said, can you play Autumn Leaves now, I want you to be able to play the melody, chords, and improvise over it. But if I said, can you play Autumn Leaves in G minor, then then I want the chords right there, no hesitation. And of course the other common key is E minor as well, meaning that the first chord's A minor, and I need the chords there. So that's the first thing as well. So if you're learning Autumn Leaves, don't just learn it in one key. You're talking about a song that essentially goes from a major key to a relative minor, the first two chords of Stand By Me. So you've got to know a 2-5-1 in a major and then 2-5-1 in the relative minor. So, you know, to learn that in two keys is basically cementing your knowledge on a much more deeper level than just learning it in one key. Even if you know that, you know, E minor is the relative minor of G major and stuff, to know it in a second key just adds so much more kind of foundation and strength to the knowledge of that. So that's kind of one thing, you know. Obviously learning it in all 12 keys would be ideal, but certainly the two common keys would be good, and that's good to do with any song really, just to learn it in another key, even if you never play it like that, because what that does is it kind of forces you to hear it better, and it forces you to really kind of understand what the harmony is doing at a deeper level, I think, because it sounds a little bit different in different keys. You know, it's like when you hear Ted Green play it, he plays it in A major, but that's good, you know, it forces you to know it and understand it on a deeper level. Same thing with the melody as well. So if you're playing Autumn Leaves in the key of G minor, first chord C minor, then you've got to know it starts on the fifth of the chord, the melody, and it goes up the scale. It moves down a tone, starts on the fifth of the next chord, same thing again. But the difference on that last one is that you have this note as well. So it's kind of a G melodic minor phrase. But like I said, it's having the knowledge at this level which helps you transfer it and helps strengthen the knowledge of the song. So once you understand that it's a sequence, that's going down diatonically each time, then you could just do the same thing in a different octave. You know, C minor of the scale to the third, and then you do the same thing again. Okay, so it's not memorization as such, it's kind of seeing what's actually going on rather than memorizing fingerings, you know. So if you do that same thing but in E minor, then its first chord is A minor 7. I know that it starts on the fifth of the chord, goes up a sequence, and then you've got the last part there, which is going into E minor. Got to use some open strings, but I'm also hearing that melodic minor defining sound as well. So that is how you memorize things, you know, properly, so that you have more kind of structure and they feel more robust, you know. And it's the same thing with that. I was playing it in the higher octave, but the same thing. And it's a sequence, so rather than move my hand down, I can move lower on the strings. Lower again, lower again. And that's what I think helps. So that's the third and final point, and that's an example really. So it's like I said, it does take a little bit more legwork in the beginning to understand. You've got to kind of see what's going on underneath your fingers. You've got to be able to hear it. But if you ultimately do that, then that means that it's not as chained to muscle memory really, and it's not as chained to monkey see, monkey do type of learning. You have full understanding of that, you know, and that's why you could do most of those things in any key very, very easily, is because you know it very, very well. You know, you could say, okay, well, you know, let's play Autumn Leaves in the key of, you know, F or something like that. And then you could just do the same thing with the melody, with the improvisation. It's all there ready to go at a moment's notice, and that is, I think, what helps jazz musicians learn songs. Now, obviously, you don't necessarily do that of every single song. Like I said, we're learning patterns and we're learning blocks. So, you know, once you've done that with Autumn Leaves, and you say, okay, it's a major 2-5-1 followed by 2-5-1 in the relative minor. Then if you're looking at something like Beautiful Love by Victor Young, that starts with a 2-5-1 in a minor, then it goes to the relative major. So it's like a reversal of Autumn Leaves. Beautiful Love is a 16-bar song. So that's already 16 bars of that song, the harmony of that song covered. So you can see how it starts to have like a snowball effect, you know, which is the good thing about it. But that's what you've got to do. You've got to memorize things well at base level. You've got to practice retrieval memory, and you've got to not feel like you have to memorize every single song you ever want to play or might want to play. You've got to really focus on the quality of the songs that you learn rather than the quantity. So I hope that these tips help you out. If you have any questions, let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.